The call came out of nowhere on a rain-soaked evening when everything in my life already felt like it was quietly falling apart. I was standing outside a small grocery store in Ohio, holding a broken umbrella, watching my reflection tremble in a puddle, when she walked up to me with eyes that looked like they carried a secret too heavy for her age. What she said next didn't just stop me in my tracks, it rewrote the direction of everything I thought I knew about life. She told me that her father wanted to see me. If this story touches you in any way, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to this channel. Believe in kindness, believe in second chances, because sometimes one small moment can change an entire life. I remember laughing softly at first, thinking it had to be a mistake. I didn't know her. She didn't know me. I was just a struggling warehouse worker barely keeping up with rent in Dayton, Ohio, and she looked like someone who still had a life untouched by hardship. But there was something in her voice that didn't allow doubt to survive. It wasn't excitement or friendliness. It was urgency wrapped in quiet sadness. She stood there under the flickering streetlight and repeated it without hesitation, as if she had been carrying those words for a long time before finally finding me. Her name was Madison Harper, and she said her father's name was Gregory Harper, a man I had never heard of but who somehow seemed to already know everything about me. That night I couldn't sleep. The rain kept tapping on my window like it was trying to remind me that life doesn't always ask for permission before it changes direction. I kept thinking about Madison's face, about the seriousness in someone so young, and about why a stranger's father would want to meet a man like me who had nothing to offer except exhaustion and unfinished dreams. The next morning, I went anyway. The address she gave led me to a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Columbus, where houses looked too perfect to belong to real people with real problems. My hands were shaking as I stood in front of a tall white house with a wide porch and a garden that looked like it had been cared for by someone who believed in order. When the door opened, Madison was there again, and behind her, sitting near a window in a wheelchair, was a man with tired eyes and a presence that immediately filled the room even without movement. Gregory Harper was not what I expected. He wasn't intimidating in the way wealthy or powerful men often are. Instead, he looked like someone who had already fought his hardest battles and was now learning how to live with what remained. His voice was calm when he finally spoke, and even without hearing his words directly, I understood the weight behind his gaze. He had been watching me for months, Madison later explained through her silence and expressions. Not in a frightening way, but in a way that suggested my life had somehow crossed paths with his long before I knew it. Gregory had once been a business owner who built companies from nothing, but a sudden illness had taken away his mobility and most of his independence. What it hadn't taken away was his instinct for reading people. And somehow, he had seen something in me. Days passed as I kept returning to their home, each visit pulling me deeper into a world I never imagined belonging to. I started helping around the house, fixing small things, running errands, and slowly becoming part of a rhythm that felt unfamiliar but strangely comforting. Madison would often sit nearby, watching quietly, as if measuring every moment of my presence with cautious hope. Gregory never asked for much at first. But he studied everything I did. The way I treated people, the way I worked without complaining, the way I never tried to impress anyone. It made me uncomfortable, like I was being tested for something I didn't apply for. Yet there was also a strange comfort in it, as if someone finally saw value in the parts of me I had long stopped noticing. My life outside their home remained the same. I still worked long hours at the warehouse, still came home to an empty apartment, still counted every dollar before the end of the month. But something inside me began to shift. For the first time in years, I started thinking about the future instead of just surviving the present. Then came the day everything changed again. Gregory asked me to sit beside him in his study. The room smelled faintly of old books and polished wood. He didn't speak immediately, and the silence felt heavier than any words could have been. When he finally looked at me, there was a clarity in his expression that made my chest tighten. He told me, in his own careful way, that he had been searching for someone trustworthy. Not someone perfect, not someone experienced, but someone honest enough to carry responsibility without letting greed take control. His business empire, once spread across several states, had become unstable due to his illness and lack of leadership. He needed someone to rebuild it, not as a replacement for him, but as someone who could protect what he had built for his daughter's future. And he believed that person was me. I remember sitting there completely still, unable to process how a man I barely knew could place something so enormous into my hands. I had no degree in business, no experience in leadership, no history of success that could justify such a decision. Everything about it felt unreal, like standing in a place where the ground might disappear at any moment. But Gregory didn't look like a man making an impulsive choice. He looked like someone who had already spent months, maybe years, arriving at this conclusion. Madison sat beside him, watching me carefully, and for the first time I saw not just curiosity in her eyes, but hope. I didn't say yes immediately. I couldn't. I went back to my apartment that night and stared at the ceiling until sunrise, thinking about everything I had ever failed at, every opportunity one had wasted, every moment I had convinced myself that people like me don't get second chances. But I also thought about something else. For the first time, someone believed I could be more than what my circumstances said I was. The decision I made the next day didn't just change my job. It changed my identity. I began working alongside Gregory's former advisors, slowly learning the structure of his company, absorbing information like someone who had been starving for direction their entire life. It was overwhelming at first, filled with mistakes and long nights of doubt. But Madison was always there in small ways, bringing coffee, sitting quietly during late hours, reminding me without words that I wasn't alone in this journey. Gregory's health continued to decline, but there was a strange peace in him whenever he saw progress. It was as if he had finally stopped worrying about what would happen after him because he had already chosen someone he trusted to continue his story. Months turned into a year, and I transformed in ways I never thought possible. I wasn't the same man who once stood outside a grocery store in the rain wondering where life was going. I had become someone who made decisions that affected hundreds of people, someone who learned that leadership wasn't about power, but about responsibility and humility. And through it all, Madison remained a quiet but constant presence, like a reminder that this entire journey had started with her walking up to a stranger and changing both of our futures without knowing it. One evening, Gregory passed away peacefully in his sleep. There was sadness, deep and heavy, but also gratitude. He had seen his daughter safe, and he had seen his trust fulfilled. At his memorial, I stood quietly, realizing that the greatest gift he had given me wasn't his company or his wealth, but the belief that I was capable of rebuilding my life from nothing. Before we reach the final moment of this story, take a second to comment below and share what this story made you feel. Your words matter more than you think. After everything, Madison approached me one last time, her eyes reflecting both grief and quiet strength. She didn't need to say much for me to understand what she was feeling. The bond that had formed between us through all those months wasn't something either of us expected, but it had become real in ways that couldn't be ignored. I continued leading the company, not as a replacement for Gregory, but as someone carrying forward the trust he placed in me. And Madison, no longer just the girl who delivered a message on a rainy evening, became a part of a life neither of us had planned but both of us had come to value deeply. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Sometimes life changes because of one unexpected meeting, and sometimes, all it takes is someone believing in you when you've stopped believing in yourself. And I still think back to that rainy evening, to the moment she said her father wanted to see me, and how I had no idea that I was about to meet the version of myself I was always meant to become.